Their subject in political law, the law on public officers. So, of course, we will define first what do you mean by public office. Okay. So, public office, it's a right and it's authority as well and duty created and conferred by law by which for a given period, either fixed by law or enduring at the pleasure of the creating power, an individual is invested with some portion of sovereign functions of the government to exercise by that individual for the benefit of or for the public. Okay, so that is the meaning of public office. So the one who administer it is called the public officer. But in many laws, okay, there are different definitions of public officers. Okay, it's important to know it because those are covered by a certain law. So if it's not included in the definition, then it is not covered by a certain law, which sometimes there are corresponding penalties. So for example, is the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. If you are covered by that, then you are liable, and it's more comprehensive. Okay, the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, the meaning of public officer is comprehensive because anybody who works in government, whether paid or not, or in any manner, is considered as a public officer, and you will be held liable under that act. So that's the importance of knowing the definition. Now, so who creates it? It is created by law. Okay. Why? Now, under section 1 of Article 11, okay, it is the public office is defined as a public trust. Okay, public office is a public trust, and public officers and employees must at all times be accountable to the people, okay, serve them with utmost responsibility, integrity, loyalty, and efficiency, act with patriotism and justice, and lead modest lives. So these are also found in the Code of Responsibilities for Public Employees. Okay, in there is a law, okay, and that law, as I mentioned, enumerate the different functions. Okay, one of that which I would like you to be reminded of is the word lead a modest lives. What does it mean? Simply means you have to live a simple life. In fact, there is a law that in times of calamity, the court may even prohibit citizen from going to a place where you present or it's more of a luxury. Okay, and it can actually prohibit. Okay, because if you keep on going to different places like and display what you eat, it would add uh, an agony to those who are not eating 3 times a day. So for government employees, you're not even allowed. There's even a it's like a standard by set by civil service not to wear so many jewelries. What is allowed is only I think one or two, because if you wear all the jewelries, one in the neck, two in your in your arms or bracelets, and perhaps two another in your legs, and even a bullet cannot, you will become bulletproof because of your so many amulets. So it's not allowed. Why? Because people seeing you wearing all this, they might think that the money that they paid in a form of tax goes to your wealth. So you may be prohibited from doing that. In fact, that may be a violation of the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, or even violation of the Code of Professional Responsibility, which enumerates all those stated in Section 1 of Article 11. Make sure you can memorize it, because certainly, even when you proceed in master's degree, it will be asked in the comprehensive exam. And in my case right now, I would like to tell you that it may be asked. I'm sure I'm going to ask that maybe in the final or one of our quizzes. Now, so what are the elements of a public office? One is that it must be created by the Constitution or the law. Like for example, there are offices that is created by law. We have the three constitutional bodies: Civil Service Commission, Commission in Audit, and COMELEC. Now, it must possess the a delegation of a portion of the sovereign power of government to be exercised in the benefit of the public, for the benefit of the public. So the power granted to the people, by the people, to these officers elected, okay, is actually a delegated power, meaning it is um, delegated by the law itself to the persons who will be exercising that authority. And third, the powers conferred and duties to be discharged must be defined, direct, or implied by the legislature or through the legislative authority. So the functions of these government offices or office, okay, is clearly defined. And where can you find that definition? It is found in the constitution and in their bylaws. Or if it's a law, if it is the law that creates it, then the law itself or the charter that creates it. Okay. Um, in our school, it is created by a Republic Act. Then the law that creates it is that law. Okay. So where can you find its power? It is found in the law itself, which create the institution. Now, the duties must be performed indefinitely and without control of a superior power. So it cannot be other than what it is not what it is not given authority. So since it is the law that creates it, and you are given that function, then nobody can dictate you on what to do, except of course by the president, when the president exercises the power of control. So in the executive branch, the president exercises two functions or two powers: the power of supervision and the power of control. Okay, and as distinguished that from the power of the president to the local government unit, where its power is only supervision, but it has no power. The president has no power of control over lower local government units. And then the principle of local autonomy or decentralization. So when we say control, the higher officer can modify, set aside the judgment of the lower office, alter, modify, or set aside the judgment of the lower officer. The president cannot do it in the local government unit, but in all executive branch. Okay, if you notice the um, organizational structure of the Philippines, the highest is the constitution. Okay, or you can put there the people under the principle of salus populi, it's suprema lex. Okay, and down the constitution we have two branches, or before even the constitution we have another branch. We have the ombudsman. Okay, because it's a separate body. Okay, they have three branches. They are equal in power. We have the executive branch, the legislative, and judicial. Or you can have put executive branch in the center. Then at the left we have the legislative. Okay, and at the right we have the judicial branch. Okay, so we have in the at the center we have the executive branch, and then down That down or below the executive branch or the president is the or are the different departments. Okay. Okay, of course you know what are these departments. Okay, it's in your fingertips. Okay, so Department of Justice, Department of Finance. Okay, I remember when I asked my students what are the five departments, and they could not even remember. But I tell you, it's in your fingertips. Okay, um, it's just look at your hands. You can remember what are the different departments. This one, this Department of Justice. Why? Because every time you commit a crime, you will have a thumb mark. Okay, that is Department of Justice. How about how about how about this one? Department of Health. Why? Because you clean your nose. Okay, so it's another department. And what is this? What department? Okay, Department of Finance. Why? Because when you count, accountants keep on putting a saliva in this finger, and then just to not to miss any bill. And and this one, Department of Education. Why? Because the point. Okay. How about this? This is a Department of Interior and Local Government. And find out its meaning. Okay. I'm going to upload this in the YouTube, and you you tell them what it means. Now, you it must have some permanency and continuity. What does it mean? Okay, so meaning that under the principle of the security of tenure, you are there. Okay, the office is created permanently except when the president himself may abolish because the president or restructure rather. It's actually a Congress who can abolish it if the laws if the law they created serves no purpose at all. Okay, so but as to the structure like creation of a deletion of a bureau under the executive branch, the president has the power to reorganize. Okay, so but basically it's intended for permanent function. Okay, so if you will be asked, can the president remove an office under its under the executive branch? Of course, yes, it can. What will happen to the employee? Of course, they will be probably not now will not be hired, but that would be for um maybe a last resort. But of course, we enjoy the security of tenure. Okay, that's why during our meetings sometimes faculty where um some faculty said that kung kuno they were not evaluated well and they get a failing grade in their evaluation. Okay, and how come kuno they are still in the government? Because that evaluation is not a ground for a dismissal of an employee. Okay, because an employee in the government secures the enjoys the security of tenure and they cannot be dismissed. Okay, except for a valid reason. One of the valid reason is gross immorality or immoral or grave misconduct. Okay, if it doesn't fall into that, it's difficult to remove an employee because they enjoy the security of tenure. Now, enjoyment of security of tenure cannot be easily deceived. Why? Because it's the bread and butter of the family, and the even the labor and the constitution protects them. Okay. Now, so permanence and continuity are not indispensable. Okay, I mentioned this one. Okay. How about the salary is not an element by the way of an office, even if the person only receives an honorarium. An honorarium is the money, not actually a salary, but it could be given to you in the form of um, savings or an amount. It's so minimal. Okay, okay, it's not even honorable to receive that honorarium. But in any case, that forms that that doesn't mean that you are not a public officer you only receive honorarium. Okay, so now, how public office is created? Of course, by a legislature. We go to modification or abolition. The power to create an office includes as well includes the power to modify or abolish um, it. So the Congress may create it and as well at the same time may abolish it. How about CNU? Can it be abolished? Yes, if Congress allows it. Okay. So if you don't want to that students will be studying in that school, then perhaps propose a law to so that Congress will abolish it. Well, but that may be so unreasonable. Otherwise, um, students will no longer be studying in the public school and they will perhaps be paying higher tuition fee in private school. Okay. Now, what's the difference between a public office and a contract? Okay. It is not a contract. Public office is not a contract. Why? Because when you say public office, it is independent or incident by the way of sovereignty. Okay, meaning with the time the state exists, then it has the power to create public office. Okay? Whereas in a contract, it originates from the will of the contracting parties. So it's created by agreement. When you say public office, okay, it carries out the sovereign as well as the governmental function, okay, affecting even persons. Okay, whereas while contract, it's an obligation, okay, imposed only upon persons who entered into contract. Okay, as to its scope, duties are generally continuing and permanent. Okay, when I discussed this already, it's permanent. While a contract, its duties are very specific as to the terms of the contract. And with what do you call the term? We call it tenure. Um, the duties is defined by law in in public office, while in contract, the duties are found in the contract itself. So in other legislation, there is another definition of public officer. Okay? So what are different definitions of a public officer? A public officer is an individual vested with some. Take note of this definition because this may vary. It has different meanings in different laws. So for now, we can define it simply as an individual vested with some portion of the sovereign functions of the government to exercise by him for the benefit of the public office. Okay, and in section 2, paragraph 14, officer is defined as a distinguished from a clerk or employee. So what do you mean by public officer? What is clerk? What is an employee? The public officer simply means refers to a person whose duties, okay, not being a clerical, okay, or manual nature, okay, it involves an exercise of a discretion. What do you mean by discretion? Meaning you may approve or disapprove, okay, and that power is on the first level. Okay, because the highest level of the agency, he may or she may has no other power but um, ministerial. So remember that power, ministerial and discretionary. Okay, when we say um, discretionary, you may approve, you may sign, or you may not. Okay, but when I say ministerial, you have no other choice but to sign. Why? Because all the requirements are there. And there's no other way but to sign it. So there are, it's different. It's also important to know its distinction. Why? Because the remedies are different. For a ministerial function, the remedy for him to do an act is mandamus. You have to mandate or command him as the court to perform his job or to let him sign. That's mandamus. Whereas if his power is discretionary, if he will not sign because, and if you think you have all the rights, okay, because you comply with the requirements and there's no other reason for him not to sign, but he did not sign, then you can ask, go to court for grave abuse of discretion. Okay, grave abuse of discretion, which is a remedy. Okay, or the complete is grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction. It is a rule 65 under the rules of court. Now, who are public officers under another section? Okay, 205 of the revised penal code. Okay, so remember those different meanings. Huh? Okay, the first one, under the administrative code, I define there are two distinctions. The public officer is the one who exercises the discretionary power, okay, in the performance of the functions of the government. Okay, when used with reference to a person having authority to do a particular act or perform a particular function in the exercise of governmental power. Officer, then in that administrative code, includes any governmental employee, agent, or body having authority to do an act or exercise of a function. That's the meaning of an officer under the revised administrative code. Whereas in the revised penal code, which sets forth the penalty for a certain crime, okay, under the administrative code that refers to all government employees. All government employees are governed by the administrative code of the Philippines, and that definition, the one I mentioned, is found in that um, code. Now, in the revised penal code that punishes all, but that punishes sets forth the all crimes in the Philippines. The definition of public officer is, okay, here, for the purposes of applying the provision of and preceding titles of the book, which is the revised penal code on public officers, any person who direct provision of the law, okay, proper election or appointment. Okay, so there are two employees in government, elected and appointed. Okay, elected, those who won in election. Okay, and then if they won, then they can appoint. Those whom they appoint to work in government are called appointed. Okay, the appointment may either be um, at the pleasure of the appointing authority. We call it as coterminus. Okay, meaning you are there because you're the appointing officer or the mayor who appoints you to be there is there. If he is not there, then you should not be there as well. That's called coterminus. By his term ends, his term, your term also ends. Okay, but there are also appointees that in nature are permanent or it or maybe contractual. If you had the qualification to work in government such as eligibility, okay, like when you reach already second year in college, I think second year you cannot take the eligibility in the civil service. And if you pass, then you can appointment may be permanent. Now, what are those coterminals? The head of the agency or head of the department, rather, like in the city, in the city, in the city hall, there are officers where who actually handles the highest position. It is all coterminous. You are there because the one you supported during election won. That's why some of them are so eager and even die for election because probably they are after of the appointment when their candidate won an election, and that makes our election more exciting. Okay, it's um no, it's like animals. This is just my personal observation. We always we fight, we die for our candidate because of a certain what position that we want to become powerful. Okay, but there is more exciting life other than that, to live a simple life. Okay, modest lives, simple living. But sometimes I try to be simple, but it's difficult to find a food. You will really starve. I tried, but it may be difficult to find for a food. But that is applicable if our houses are are distant to each other. The reason why we compete is because our neighbors are close to us and they keep on hampering us. They really want to show power. But that can be avoided if you stay in the place where you cannot see your neighbors. I build one. It's far from neighbors, and maybe tomorrow I'll go there. It's my favorite place. It's quiet place. Yeah, but sometimes it's difficult to look for a food. Been difficult to buy for a food because very far. Okay, all you have to do is to had a dried fish with you or anything that can be eaten for a week. Otherwise, it will become rotten or spoiled. Now, in that again definition, um, so appointment or election by the competent authority, okay, shall take part in the performance of the public function in the government of the public of the Philippine Islands, or shall perform in the said government or any of its branches public duties as an employee, agent, subordinate official, or any rank or class shall be deemed a public officer. Okay? So, take note of that definition. Okay? It doesn't talk about salary. In previous definition, as long as it doesn't, you function as a government or they have an iota of being a public officer, you're considered a public officer. So here in the revised penal code, okay, you may be liable. What's the importance of doing this? Actually, there's a case. Okay, her name is Hannah. I will not mention the name, but she is actually a board of regent in UP, and they were charged for graft and corruption. Okay, uh, higher than that. I think what's higher than graft and corruption, where the money involved is 50 million and above. They call it plunder, sir. Yeah, plunder. That's it. Plunder. I'm just trying if you are there listening. Okay, plunder. They were charged. And then she said, no, I'm not a government employee because I'm only a student. Okay? Court said, no, you are a government employee. Okay? The fact that there is an iota, okay, of being a government employee, I mean, exercising a service in the government, that you may fall under here. Okay? Or even one of those who work with you is charged with plunder, then those who are colleagues, even if they are private, will be held liable. So in that case, there are two reasons why she can be can be charged under plunder. Why? Because his colleagues are or government officials are charged with plunder. Second is that the meaning of government officer is that it doesn't necessarily mean you are a private officer as long as there is a um there's public function in the government of the Philippine Islands, or shall perform the said government or any of his branches in the public duties as an employee, agent, or subordinate official, or any rank or class shall be deemed a public officer. Okay, an officer is distinguished from a mere employee. What's the difference? Well, now another definition. Okay, we'll just take note first of the different definition of the public officer. Now, under RA 3019 Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, okay, who will be charged? Of course, they will say there, government and the public officer. What's the meaning of that public officer and government? Because these are covered. They take note that if you are not exempt, if you are not included, you will be exempt. Okay, who are those included or included in the meaning of that public officer? But we'll define first what is government in that RA 3019 or Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, Section 2. Okay, government includes the national government, the local government or the LGU, the government-owned, mga GOCC, okay, all government institutions, government-owned and controlled corporations, and all other instrumentalities and agencies of the Republic of the Philippines and their branches. So all that perhaps where the budget of government is allocated. What is the meaning of public officer there? Public officer there under that RA 3019 includes elective and appointed officials and employees permanent or temporary, whether in the classified or unclassified. Okay, what do you mean by unclassified? Even classified. Okay, clearly they are paid by the wages and or exempt service. Okay, receiving compensation. Okay, even nominal. Okay, from the government as defined in the preceding subparagraph. So anything, any amount that you receive from the government, then you are considered as a public officer. So if you perform an act and you commit a crime and you belong to that definition, okay, so take note of those definitions na I falling under revised penal code, na I falling under administrative code. There's another meaning of public officer falling under 3019. Okay, so there are many meanings depending on the crime committed. Okay, so remember that um permanent or temporary, whether classified or unclassified. So the keyword here under 3019 is that the one who is receiving any amount, okay, even nominal from the government as defined by the preceding subparagraph. So if you notice sa anti-graft, as long as you receive money from the government in any form, then you are a public officer for the purpose of committing or violating that law. Okay? So, naka-receive kag amount and then you commit a crime like putting it in your own pocket. Well, you may be held liable under Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. As to the distinction of public officer and employee, what is the distinction? Okay, when you say public officer, or go first to the definition of public employee, when used by reference to a person in the public service, includes any person in the service of the government or any of its agencies, division, subdivision, or instrumentality. Okay? So by public employment, in a broader, it's broader than a public office. Okay, all public office is a public employment, but not all public employment is a public office. Public employment as a position lacks either one or more of the foregoing elements of public office. Now I'll now a public employment, okay, is a broader term, okay. So it is created by a contract rather than the law. I'm referring to a public employment. Public employment as a position lacks either one or more of the foregoing elements of public officials. It is created by contract rather than by force of a law. So what's the difference between an officer and an employee? An officer, his position is greater importance, dignity, and independence. He is required to take an official oath, okay, which is not in public employee, ordinary employee. He has the greater liability on account for a misfeasance or non-feasance. Misfeasance, wrongdoing. There's an act to do but you miss. You did not perform it well. Non-feasance, there's an act to do but you did not perform. Okay, his tenure and office is usually different from that of an ordinary employee. So that's one of the distinction. Now, in maybe the last point here in this session, okay, as to who are public officers. Generally, persons holding office at employment which are not public offices, okay, meaning those missing one in the essential elements. Example, a concession with the forest guard. Okay, it's not an officer. Why? Because his duty is to guard the forest, but through a contract by the lumber. So although he performs an act, but it's only a contract entered by another private person, he is not a public officer. So